Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this hybrid event. Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. Thank you. Welcome to this session, co-sponsored by the Canadian Bookbinders and Artists Guild and Western Libraries, involving Dr. Paul Potter, who's going to be speaking to us for the next little while about 5 selected examples from the Hannah Collection on the History of Medicine, which we have here at Western Libraries, Archives and Special Collections. This is a collection that includes books that were acquired through annual grants from the Hannah Institute for the History of Medicine as support for the Hannah Professor Program from 1974 to 1999. During this period, Professor Paul Potter, as Hannah Chair, was an integral part of the building of this impressive collection due to his astute guidance on acquisitions to fill major gaps in Western's holdings in this field. And without any further ado, I'd like to have Dr. Potter sit in and go through the rest of the collection.
Well, welcome to Western, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to give my own introduction because that way at least it'll be well, I don't know, maybe it won't be true at all, but at least it'll be my view of it, and it'll be short. Okay, well, essentially, I guess we can say I'm the result of 2 seductions. My first seduction was in high school, where my Latin teacher in Hamilton, Ontario, who had a PhD from the Sorbonne, set up the Greek club on Tuesday evenings with grape juice and chocolate cake. That's where I started Greek, besides Latin. That was the first seduction. The second seduction, I went to McGill to study medicine. When I was there, of course, the Osler Library. And as a student of Greek, as well as pre-meds, I went to the Osler Library, and it's just a wonderful collection. And they're very generous with giving the people their books as we are here. And at that point, I really became a book collector. And so it's just those 2 things went together. And then, of course, I got to a point in life where I had to do something concrete, and I didn't want to practice medicine. And so history of medicine was a natural thing. And then I had the good fortune to be part of Jason Hannah's program here at Western, as we have programs at all the Ontario medical schools in history of medicine. Thanks to him, he ran an insurance company before OHIP. And then when OHIP came, he had money. And being a businessman, he did not want to give it to the government. So instead, he put it in something that he thought was positive, and I think is very positive. So here we are, long after his passing, still benefiting from his generosity. Okay, so what we have today are 6 books. I picked these books because they cover a period of roughly 1,000 years. Now, unfortunately, the first one is a fake, but it's a very good fake. And better a good fake, perhaps, than a not so good something genuine. In any case, it so happens that in Vienna, in Austria, is a book which was purchased in 1579 in Constantinople, Istanbul, and which actually at that time was 1,000 years old. The book was 1,000 years old. And we know that because we can tell exactly the year, well, not exactly the year, but within a few years of when the book was produced. It was a medical book. And why a medical book was the present that a certain part of Constantinople donated to a woman who was a benefactor of reconstructing, fixing up churches, we don't know. But in any case, it's a splendid work, both from a scientific point of view, but also from an artistic point of view. I've never seen this book in the original. When I was in Vienna, I asked the library director, and he said they don't show it. And I think that's why they made the facsimile. So between the years 1965 and 1970, they took the book apart, and they had worm damage and things like that. The binding, which was not the original binding, was already damaged. So they just put on a very simple, sturdy, modern binding. The book then, as I say, it's not, I think probably what they do is maybe once a year, they put it out and show a page or so of it. But I can imagine, I mean, since it has all this paint, I mean, it's pictures partly or mainly, I can imagine you don't really want too much light or too much polluted air on it. I assume that's why they do that. Okay, so what is the book? The book is an edition of a book called Materia Medica in Latin, which was written by a Greek by the name of Dioscorides in the 1st century AD. The book is a collection of the known medicinal plants, as well as animals and insects who provided materials that were medicinally important. It was a complete, sort of an encyclopedia, you might say. And the question of how he arranged, just imagine your project. You have to arrange all the plants in a medical book. What order are you going to do it in? By what you treat? By, I mean, the things to keep people healthy versus the things to cure certain diseases. In any case, Dioscorides did have an order. And the order kind of goes along like this. The dandelion. The dandelion is good for such and such. It's yellow and it does this, da, 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 da. And then he jumps to the next yellow plant. And the next yellow plant happens to be good because, or interesting because it has very thin leaves. So then he joins the next one is a plant with thin leaves. And you see what I mean? If you worked with the book, you would figure that out after a while. But it's not exactly that user-friendly. So quite soon, and we don't know exactly when, but in the few centuries after Dioscorides, somebody put it into alphabetical order. They took the book and they rearranged it and they put all the A words together, all the B words, alphabet and so on. And so it is alphabetical, but not completely alphabetical. It's just all the A's are together and all the B's are together. And although it seems obvious to you and me how to read an alphabetical book, it's not easy. Try reading an alphabet, try to put words in order alphabetically backwards, and you're going to find out it is not easy at all. So it just shows that we have been brought up, and I suppose people at a certain point were brought up to learn, okay, now's the first letter, then I look at the second letter, and I look at the third letter. But I suppose that didn't matter so much in the Middle Ages. As long as they had all the A's together, that was a big start. In any case, Dioscorides says explicitly in the book, it's not alphabetical. So obviously it wasn't, but now it is. So we just have to accept it is. Okay, so what I would like to show you from this book, and we're going to show you some, I mean, this lecture is, or talk, whatever, is going to be mainly pictures. And Tom from our archives here, from Western Libraries, is going to be our photographer. And so if he would just look at that book, and luckily I have another copy of it here, a little copy. And so I can tell you exactly what I'm seeing, and he's going to show it to you on the book. Okay, please turn back to page 1. Here, a peacock. Well, the book is a peacock. It's a very beautiful book. It's got color. You'll see that that page is torn, but that doesn't matter. I mean, maybe a third or a quarter of the book's gone, but people have just filled back in and so on. So this is the peacock. No, the peacock's back, here's the body of the peacock, there's the feathers. So it should be that way, right? Okay, well, anyway, forget the peacock. Now we can go to the two verso. And two verso is a picture, okay? Okay, so what you see are a number of figures here of people, except in the middle at the top, and that's a centaur. Right? A centaur being a half horse, half human. And the centaur is a person called Charon, who was mythologically supposed to have been the one who taught medicine to the first medical people. So Charon, and then he taught Asclepius. And Asclepius, who became the god of medicine, he taught him medicine. So you can see the book, although a present for fixing up churches, is still very much in a pagan atmosphere. Right? I mean, the people don't see any real contradiction. Okay, so if we can forget Kieran, and now just go gradually through and show me something like four verso or 5 verso. Okay, that was good. This one is interesting because here we have, on the left, we have Dioscorides. On the right, we have the goddess of discovery. And she's holding up, you can't quite see it, but at her front, in front of her legs, she's holding up a dog who's having a convulsion. This is to prove to you that hellebore, the plant, will cause convulsions. So in other words, we now have a bit of science in here, right? We have an exhibition of how we know that these drugs have certain effects. Okay, I now ask you to go ahead to something like 10 verso, let's say. By the end of this year, stop. This is the one I want to see. Okay. Here we have a picture of, I haven't told you this yet, of the woman who actually donated the book. And her name was Juliana Anikia. And she, in the year 512, 513 AD, she was very well placed. Her father had been a Roman consul, both in Italy and in Greece. That was at a time when the Byzantine Empire was just being formed, so it was still combined. And so her father was very well positioned, and her husband, of course, was rich too. And so she is sitting in the middle there, and on the side of her are 2 mythological figures, right? These are sort of abstractions like wisdom and good behavior or something like that. So this is sort of a symbol of the how shall we put it, of thanks for what she did. And this then is part of the book. You can see at the top, there's a little bit of Greek written up there. And in fact, on the blue part, which you can't see very well, there is some white writing, and that was scratched on there at some point. And that actually tells you who she is and what she's being thanked for. Okay, so you can go ahead now to let's say 10 or 12, and we're going to get into the index here. Here we go. Okay. Now, I'd like you to get a bit closer to that, if you could. That's good. Very nice. Okay. So this is the letter A. This, if you can't see it too clearly, don't worry, because it's not that clear. In other words, it's somewhat damaged, but you can see they're all capital letters. These are called majuscules. We call them, we don't say big letters or capitals, we say majuscules. So these are majuscules, and you can see, and now you can just go down a bit and you can see A's, and you go to the right a bit. You can see gamma, right? You can see delta. So these are the letters of the alphabet with the different plants. So this is the index, but this is the index that was written in 513, right? That's when it was written. We're going to see later that as we go through, people kept modifying and improving. They thought, okay. So here then it is, turn the page. Yes. So you can you see here, you're going through the Greek letters, zeta, eta, iota, kappa, and so on. And if you would just go to 13 recto. Okay, this is the title page. And you can see these all capitals, right? Large, this is the capital, and you can see, and it says, I'll just read it to you. See the TA, ta, that's a delta and an E, so tade, then NST. So this is in the book, and then it talks about his name here, the second line, pedan, neo, Dioscuridu, because it's a genitive, okay? So this is, it says, this is what's in here, written by Dioscorides, and then it goes on to tell you, it's about plants, it's about roots, it's about juices that come out of plants, and then if you go on the other side, over here, okay, what do we got here? We're gonna have here phula, it's got leaves, and then you can see the third line, kai, which means end in Greek, and then pharmakon. okay, of drugs. So this then is the introduction where, and you can see, I mean, this is majestic, right? This is what the Byzantines could do. And I mean, I think a lot of what governments do, or people who want to impress, they write in a certain fashion. I mean, the Roman, when you look at a Roman inscription of the high time, it's very impressive. I mean, the letters, they show you that this is perfect. It's here forever, just the way our Roman Empire is here forever. That's what they're really saying. And that's something that I always, when I lectured, told the students that since they could neither write nor spell anymore, they were definitely on the downward slope, right? Okay, now we just go forward a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so here, this is the first plant. Okay, now you can move your camera back a bit. Just, no, don't turn it. Just move it back in so that the whole plant will be on there. Very good. Okay, so here's a plant. Well, let me just look it up here. Okay, this plant is very significant for what happened. Okay, now when you look at this picture, you see the plant. And then you have the Greek title, which is down there, which is the ever-living, the plant's name is the ever-living. I don't know what it is. And this is, and it's Taumega, the big one. And here's the plant. You can see that it is a picture that if you were a botanist, you could recognize the plant. This is not someone who was told, well, it's got big leaves or something, and then drew them with big leaves. This is a person who knows the plant. And notice they also include the root. So that's the first thing to, and I'm going to show you some more plants. The plants are, I mean, they're great works of art as well as very scientifically accurate. Okay? But if we look, if you can look at the that column of first on the next page, on that page right there. Now, if you can just go down closer, you've got the Greek on the left, right, with the capitals. But beside it, you have, that's Latin. Here, there. See, that's Latin. Okay. So in other words, the book has been in the hands of some Latin doctor. How did that happen? Well, we all know how it happened. Among the worst things that was done, you can't say the worst thing that was done in history, but anyway, in 1204, the Italians conquered Constantinople, right? It had held the Islamic world back for 600 years, protecting the Italians. And so what the Italians do, they went and conquered it. And so it was Italian for about 60 years. Then it was reconquered. It was Greek then for another 200. But at that time, not only were a lot of books destroyed, but of course they were stolen like this, but it didn't get out of Constantinople. So the book then had a life after 1260. Okay. But this shows that some Italian in that 60-year period used this book. Now, if you look where you've got the picture of the perfect place, you can see on the left, up at the very top, it's written in Greek, right? But then what's that underneath, above, just above the plant? What language? Well, it's Arabic. It's Arabic. Which shows that the book at some point was in the hands of his Turks, right? After 1453, when they conquered Constantinople, then some Turkish doctors had it. And in fact, if I can't see, I don't see on this page, but there are pages, certainly pages where it's also in Hebrew. Because there were Jewish doctors who had it too. So in other words, the book made it through all these different cultures and was always valued, and the science was transmitted, right? People could just take the book, and even if you couldn't read the Greek, well, you could at least appreciate the pictures, and that would be useful. Okay, so I've just got a few other I picked out here. Can you go to 16 recto? Okay, 16 recto is interesting. What we have here is the Greek text, okay, at the top. the capitals, right? Below them, you can see more Greek with capitals, but they're smaller. Those are quotes in Dioscorides. That's when Dioscorides makes reference to other Greek writers, so he puts it in there as a quote, but it's smaller. But then what happened was, now I can tell you as a Greek scholar, reading these capitals, which have no division between words, right, is not easy. And it does not have, like in Greek, we have marks that tell us how they differentiate words according to how they're pronounced. They're called accents. And we also have a little thing like a little C, and that means H. So every vowel at the beginning of a word has either a little C or a little backwards C. But as a C, it means it's H. Like Hippocrates is just I with an H up on top. If it didn't have an H, it would be written this way. But then one more thing about Greek accents. Greek accents don't behave. If you put a comma in front of a certain accent, the accent changes. When you change the different tenses of the word, the accents change. So they're a nightmare, right? They're a total nightmare. On the other hand, they differentiate things, right? But it's not easy. Okay, in any case, somebody around, we know around 1400 couldn't take the capitals anymore. So he transliterated the Greek into handwriting, into small letters, and that's what you have on the right. Right? You can see, could you go a bit closer to the handwriting? Okay, so here you can see this is Greek, and it's got its accents and it's got the words separated, right? So this is far easier to read, which shows, I mean, this sort of the tension between aesthetics and usefulness, right? I mean, which would impress you as an empire, the top part, but which part can you read, the lower part? Okay, I'm just going to show you a couple of plants. 144 recto. Okay, if you got 144 recto, this is the fennel, and it's just a beautiful fennel plant, right? Okay, I'm going to show you another one. 203. 203 is a plant which is called the leukoion in Greek, which means the white sort of plant. And this is a plant that we call in English stalks. Okay. You see the yellow flowers? Yeah. Again, everything about it is biologically right. And again, you can see the Arabic up at the top. See the Arabic? But go down to the bottom left corner, and that's Hebrew. Okay. So this is proof of the different users. Okay. One more plant. 293. Yeah, that is it. You can see the little fruits on it. Okay. So in other words, I think we said enough about this book, but you can appreciate that it's a unique event, right? Especially that we have it. Okay, so now we're going to go through the Renaissance. We're going to jump. Let me just think. You can just take it away. You can just take it away, and it's if you can help it, if you can lift it. Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to jump ahead. Let me just think. We're going to just 1,000 years. Okay, and this book, then, if you can just turn, yeah, that's good. This book, then, what we're going to do now is Greco-Roman medicine. Dioscorides was Greco-Roman medicine, and this is sort of the rebirth, renaissance, right, of Greco-Roman medicine. So this is an edition of the works of Hippocrates. Okay. Which is the first complete Greek edition of Hippocrates. It's 1526. I'm going to first just show you the title page. Now this you can just read. Okay, see, you see it says in Greek, Hapantita to Hippocrates, everything of Hippocrates. Then it says it in Latin, Opera Omnia Hippocrates. And then you go down, you see that this symbol is probably the greatest, the most, how should I put it, famous symbol of a publishing company. It's a dolphin and an anchor, which means, how you could say it in different languages. You can say, in German, you say Eile mit Weile. That means hurry up, going slowly. Or sputa bredeos in Greek. And in Latin, what is it? In any case, it means, the idea was, and if you're ever making books, you'll know this, you want to hurry up to get it done. On the other hand, you've got to go letter by letter or it's not going to be right. So that was the motto of this company. The company was in Venice. The man's name was Aldus Manutius. And you can see, if you just go down on the dolphin, you'll see Aldus. See? So this was Aldus's symbol here. It says Aldus. And he was a man who was born in a town just south of Rome, and probably, about the middle of the century. That is about 1450. Classicism at that time was a madness. It was a fad, right? Everybody was into it as far as they could be in it. The rich people wanted to have Greek books. They wanted people to study Greek. They had the idea they were going to set up schools that spoke Greek. Greek was a mania. And so Aldus got the idea, I'm sure he wasn't the first person, that he was going to set up a publishing house in Venice. As you know, printing was invented in Germany, but very quickly moved to Italy. Venice was the great capitalist center, right? Whatever was going, if there was money to be made, Venice was the place. So the Venetians then went into it, and Aldus started publishing, and all the famous writers, Aristotle, Plato, Hippocrates, but all the dramatists, the Greek dramatists, the Greek historians, the first edition is not always Aldus, but usually. Right? So Aldus they just knocked them off one after another. Now, I can tell you, for me to do that, what's in that volume, took me 50 years, okay? Now I'm slow, but you got to be Eile mit Weile, right? you got to get it right. So in other words, they did it in 1 year. Right? That's how fast they did it. Now they worked a lot more than I do, and they had more people, and they had a lot of Greek refugees who they paid nothing, who had to do the work. So Aldus then did these works. If you now we can go down and read the part under the dolphin. Mm-hmm. The part under the dolphin says, let nobody without punishment, either in Venice or anywhere else, print this edition of Hippocrates. This is the privilege, what we call the copyright. And who signs it? The Pope, right? Clemens VII, plus, okay. Oh yeah, the Senate of Venice, that is the Doge, right? Because, and on this one, we don't have the King of France, but often these early privileges also have the King of France, and it may also have the Holy Roman Emperor. These are the figures who protect. And in fact, in this book, we're not going to go through it, but it actually tells you, if you do that, what's going to happen. And what's going to happen is the person that turns you in gets half the money. So there's a big motive to turn you in. And the other half, of course, goes to all those guys who like the Pope and so on. So I think all this gets a little bit, but not much. Okay, so I'm just like you to go ahead a bit to no, we're going to be one more sec. If you just go ahead, I'd like you to go to, just go to page 1. Oh, you're going to notice that there are no number. The first 8 pages aren't numbered. Okay, so you can go when the numbers start. Oh, no, one more thing. Just go back for a bit. Sure. You see on the title page is a stamp. On the title page. On the other side, sorry, in the recto. There's a stamp here. You see it says the Medical Society of London. That's London, England. It was a medical society formed in 1773 by a man by the name of Dr. Lettsom. And Dr. Lettsom's owned that society, the London Medical Society, owned the book until 1984. 1984, they sold it to the Weldon Library, which was a medical historical institution. You turn the page, you're going to see withdrawn by the Weldon Library, who sold it. They got it donated to them in 84 and sold it in 85, which shows you that they already had a copy. Okay, and so they sold it, and Western was luckily was able to get a hold of it. So that's how it came to us. And this book then, again, for a scholar, is a very important book, because everybody who edited Hippocrates after this started with this text. They then improved it, but this is what they started with. Okay, so now I'd like you to go to, you see some Latin here, right? Here's some Latin that's telling you about how what was done, right? First, the dedications and so on. Keep going. You don't need that. This is a letter by the editor, Franciscus Azulanus, who was Aldous' son-in-law. Aldous was dead by that time. And then turn the page. This is the contents. And notice that they didn't list the page numbers, which makes kind of a pain. Like why didn't somebody write them in the meantime? Okay, and one more thing, this book is numbered not by pages, but by leaves, by folios. So there's the front, which is called the recto, and the back, which is called the verso. And so now we're going to just start here. Can you just go, I think this is the life of Hippocrates, right? Let's just see. Perry. In any case, I'd like you to try to get as close as you can to this. One thing you have to admit, it's handwriting, right? This is not capital letters, this is handwriting. And in fact, the early printers of Greek exactly imitated handwriting. That means even for 3 or 4 letters put together was one piece of type. Okay, so the word and, and there were also short forms. So say and, they don't have the and in Greek that we have, but they have another and so and then they would have a symbol that would be and, but then if you said something that had A and D in it, alpha and so on, they would actually put that in the word. So the words are often made up of, where it's a 10 letter word, it's got 3 pieces of lead. Okay. So in other words, it's the typesetter had 500 types to draw from, right? We have 26 in English, right? He had 500, and these were the poor refugees. So they had to, now the result you might think is hard to read, but in fact, it's very easy to read, because once you've been brought up with that handwriting, it's just straight ahead, right? So it's a very easy thing. Like, of course, when you start reading it, well, first when you start reading Greek at all, if you don't know Greek, it's hard. But then when you start on this, it gets harder again. But after you've done it for 50 years, it's really easy. So in any case, this is the standard then, until not that long later, in France was developed a more beautiful writing, which of Greek, but these were really the standard until 1800. Up until 1800, Greek was always written, put together like that. But then, of course, people said that's crazy, and they wanted individual letters, and then since then we've had individual letters. Okay, let me just see, is there anything more I want to say in this? Oh, there's, would you just go to, no, I think we'll just skip it. So anyway, this shows you how Greek started. And the idea was everybody who wants to really practice medicine properly is going to buy something like this and study Greek. But of course, this was a bit wishful thinking. And so it quickly showed itself that they wanted it in Latin. They didn't want it in Greek. And so the next book I've given you is not Hippocrates, but rather Galen, who's a writer in the 2nd century AD, the time of the Roman emperors. And Galen wrote, I haven't told you this, but 1/10 of all Greek literature that survived from antiquity is medical. Okay, so in other words, it's a huge body of writings. in comparison. This book I just give you, it's a French book published by a high-power French publisher who didn't do just Greek books or medical books, did everything. And it was his name is Simon de Colline. And this is actually just the part of Galen that has to do with pulses. Pulses, as you probably know, had a big medical significance then. And so this book, if you just turn a few pages, you can see first it's kind of elegant in its way. Okay. What I'd like, oh yeah, this book's got an interesting thing. It's dedicated to two people. One, to Francis I of France, but to Henry VIII of England. I guess he was covering all his bases. In any case, you can see here, the title the French king had was the most Christian king of the Gauls, right? That's what it says. So the Christianissimo Galliarum Regi Francesco. So that's Francis, the most Christian. Okay, and so this is, he writes to some, I mean, these dedications are often to people who paid money towards the publication, who are friends, people in high places, that sort of thing. Okay, so what else have we got in this book? Okay, if you just go ahead, you'll see, you've seen the title page, very simple. Then if you go to A2, okay, now I just show you that one of the reasons I wanted to show you this was just aesthetically. If you just go up to the top again and look at that letter, it's a very beautiful thing. It's called criblé, which I don't know what it means in French, but it means it's got little dots on there. You can see the P, but then in the black part, there are little white dots, right? So it's a very aesthetically effective, artistic contribution, got nothing to do with medicine. And then you can see at the left, the table of contents of the book. It's got the six writings of Galen on the different pulses. And 3 of those are dedicated to Francis, and the last 3 are dedicated to Henry VIII. Okay, if you would just go ahead to, after 147, go to 147 and then go ahead. Okay, and here we have the unconquerable, the most unconquerable, the most illustrious Henry VIII of England. So, of course, he was unconquerable because he's on an island. But okay, in any case, you can see that. And there's just one thing I'd like you to look at in that second, no, go back to the first section to page 16. Okay, so this is a book about pulses, and pulses were very numerical, right? How fast, and then also quantitative. Okay, so what you see here is a table. In other words, he wants to tell you, he wants to take his knowledge about pulses, and he wants to tell you, first you can have a longus. Let's just let me go a bit closer so I can read them. Okay, longus, and if you've got a long one, then the next one will be, how broad is it? And the next one will be, how strong is it? And the last is, how big is it? And actually, when you try to think out what that means in a pulse, it doesn't you can't grasp it, but they thought they could grasp it. So this is the quantification. So it's kind of scientific, right? Of pulses. Okay, so I think we had enough of this book. The next book I'm going to show you. So this was books in Latin, and I'm going to give you an example of how you put things together. Just open the page and look at the title page. This is a complete works of Hippocrates. It's thicker than the other one because this one's got Latin as well as Greek. It's got both together. This is published in Padua or Venice, okay, by a company called the Junta family. Oh, it's in Venice. You can see down at the bottom, Venetius, Industria et Sumptibus Juntarum. Okay, and if you go up a bit, you'll see it has here Hippocrates Coi, so the works of Hippocrates, Greci et Latine. And then you have the person. And what we have here are pictures out of the life of Hippocrates and the life of Galen, okay? And the only one I want you to look at is the one under the writing. Okay. And you see here in the background is a city, right? Over here on the right is a city, and that's the city of Kos, which is the city where Hippocrates lived, mythologically, not really. And what we have here is Hippocrates with his fire, and it says Hippocrates wards off a plague by burning fires around the city. Right? So it might have worked in COVID. In any case, Hippocrates by this time had become a sort of a mythological figure. In antiquity, in fact, he was already partly a mythological figure. And we have from antiquity fake letters written by Hippocrates. Right? We have fake stories about him that somehow created the myth of Hippocrates as the great healer. Actually, as a strict historian, one has to say we don't know what Hippocrates wrote. We know he was very famous as a doctor, but we can't pick any book of the Hippocratic collection and say, well, that one for sure is by Hippocrates. They all are supposed to be by Hippocrates. They all contradict each other. They're all from different times. Some are by surgeons, other by gynecologists. So it's a whole big story, but that's beside the point. In spite of that, Hippocrates was famous in the Middle Ages. And in fact, it was his fame that led to his books being carried through the Middle Ages, right? In other words, about 800 or 900 in the Byzantine Empire, that's about 300 or 400 years after the first book, there was a kind of a beginning Renaissance almost. And so books like that were already starting to fall apart. And so people were recopying them. And it was just at that time, about 850 or so, they started to change them from capitals to small letters. And so they felt that they had to sort of go through all of the important writers and change them. And that's the next family of manuscripts, right? And those are the ones, it's called minuscule manuscripts. And these then are the ones, some of which even survive till today. And so those are the ones we use. They're the ones that the Aldine edition was based on. And the ones that the Aldous edition is based on all exist today. So we can, in fact, they even wrote in the margins their corrections, the printers, and we can see what was there before the printer, and we can compare two different manuscripts, and we can see these copying this one to that one. So it's a great insight into how the text evolved from about 1000 on. This is sort of the end of that development. This is a book printed by publishers who were, again, super big business. And so they published all Galen, all Hippocrates, but everything else, right? This is a very expensive book, obviously. And just show us a picture somewhere in the middle, anywhere, maybe where, okay, that's good. Just where there's Greek and Latin together. Okay, so you can see that the book is essentially set up parallel. So what we have here is on the left side, we have the Greek, and on the right side, we have the Latin. And this then would mean that the user could read the Latin and pretend he could read the Greek, or read a little bit of the Greek, or try to improve the Latin with the Greek. In any case, this book obviously is a book for people with a lot of money, who are either doctors or Jesuits or kings or something like that. And this book, I will just mention that we were able to buy this. It was owned by actually a doctor in Mexico, but he sold it, and then we were able to buy it. So now we have it in our collection. Like, what I tried to do was to get all the editions of Hippocrates through the ages for Western, and I haven't totally succeeded, but I'm still working on it. And it's not because I don't have the money. I don't have the money, but I mean, if you got the book, I think you could get the money. But if you got the money, you can't get the book. So that's the way it is. Okay, so this is close that, and with that, we're going to close ancient medicine. But the Renaissance wasn't just ancient, right? It thought it was, and it was concentrated on it, but it has some things of its own. Okay, now this little book is the book for the not rich. This is probably the book for the student. And this little book was printed in Basel, which was the next great printing center after Venice. And this little book contains 3 writings which don't have much to do with each other, but they're all ancient. 2 of the 3 are ancient medical texts, right? One is by a little piece of Hippocrates, and one is a Latin writer on medications. Okay? Again, important. But in this one, notice it's cheap, no pictures, it's just the text. And you could read the title page. It says Scribonius Largus is the name of the Latin writer, 1st century AD, who wrote about a whole bunch of prescriptions. The third book rather is a little piece of Hippocrates, but the second one is an Italian text first published in 1507. In other words, now we're going to have something modern. We're not going to have just antiquity. We're going to have, and this man, whose name was Benevieni, Antonio Benevieni. Benevieni was a very learned doctor, and he got the idea that it would help to look inside dead bodies to get an idea of what they died from. Now, the ancients did dissect human beings in Alexandria for a period. We don't know how long, maybe 100 years, around 300 BC, but then they didn't do it anymore. But in 1315, an Italian writer wants to make an argument with something. He said, in the body of the woman I dissected last year. So obviously, dissection was there by 1315. We don't know when it started. Nobody tells us. But in any way, it quickly made its way into the curriculum all through Europe. I mean, there was always anatomy day or anatomy week when once a year they got a body hanged, which they would then dissect and show the students. You don't learn too much by that. And so it's not a surprise that for 200 years after that, not so much was learned. Nonetheless, dissection's there again. And that's what made it possible for Benevieni to have the idea, maybe we can see from how the body's changed to find out the cause of death. So that's why he calls his book, here we go. This is an edition of it's on the hidden causes of diseases. That's what the book was called. First published, he died in 1502. His brother had the book. The brother found all his library and he found the notes for 300 dissections. So his brother then published his choice of 130 in Paris in 1507. And this company, when they found it, they thought, hey, there's maybe something we can, this was all pirated, right? They weren't paying anything to the company in Paris. So they just put it in there in a cheap book so that people could work with it. So this is the first little bit of the ancient world being superseded, right? And for our last book, could you bring over the last book? Okay. Never has anybody had to do Vesalius in 4 minutes, but I will. Okay. This shows you that book, by the way, had the ancient bind. Had a real binding with vellum. This is Vesalius's. Let's just close it. We can first look at the binding. The binding here is a binding made in Basel in Switzerland. It's stamped on it 1573. And you can see it's it's made with vellum, which has been blind stamped. That means it's stamped with no color, right? Like you could make the part you indent black or something, which they sometimes did, but this one's just blind stamped. That means it's the same color. And you can see, being Basel, it's Protestant, and you can see some of the little figures on there, and you'll see 3 little figures, and one is Eraz, obviously Erasmus, one is Johann, and one is Phil. So one is obviously, and one is Martin. So it's obvious we've got Erasmus, who was a Protestant, and we've got Philip Melanchthon, and we have let me see, John. John is probably John of Andernach. I don't know. He anyway did a lot of text and translations and so on. So what we have there, but that's beside nothing to do with the contents, just got to do with the times when the book was published. In any case, it's a very beautiful binding. And this is made from vellum, and it's made in a process which uses base rather than acid. To prepare books, to tan books with calf, you have to use acid. And the result is the acid's in it. And that's why very rarely does a book with leather ever last more than 400 years, because it just dissolves by itself. These last forever. Well, not quite. This one, you can see it broke along the back, and that was corrected. That book is repaired by a man by the name of Dan Meza, who lives here in London, who is an expert restorer of books. Thank you, Dan. I'll just say that to you. So now we can look inside it. This book is a book that the publisher knew was going to be a hit, right? You can't go wrong. And so no amount of money was too much. And so we have artists, the famous artists of the time, this is the man, the author is a man by the name of Vesalius. Vesalius was a medical person from family originally from Belgium, but he studied in Paris then, and he became the great anatomist of the 16th century. He became professor in Padua, which was the most famous university at the time for medicine, when he was 29. He peaked early. I mean, he produced this book and became the great professor when he was 29. The rest of his life was on hold, sort of. In any case, I'm going to just show you a few things from this book. What I would like you to show me, you can show the title page. Title page shows the dissection, him dissecting, right? And you can see this is a partly fantasy picture. You can see, for example, let me just see. If you just go up a bit, you can see these guys hanging off the balcony. Well, they're probably in the section room. They didn't have that. Now here's Vesalius. That's Vesalius, right? You can see him there on the left side. And then you can see, see the monkey over on the left at the edge? That's because Galen dissected monkeys, but not human beings. So this was to sort of show that we moved on. And so on. So this book was published again in Basel, a great publication, center of publication. You see Basel. And then if you just go up a bit, we can appreciate the picture some more. You can see that it's a woman being dissected. So this is how the book begins. Then if you just turn the page, we have here the introduction, and this is to Charles V, who was the Holy Roman Emperor, okay, at the time. And notice the V. This sort of puts a lot of things together. In the V, you have a tree with a man tied to the tree and a god skinning him, which is an ancient story of, and you can tell the story because if you look down on the ground in front of his feet, if you just get closer and closer, what you're going to find is a pipe that you play. This was a human by the name of Marsyas, who told Apollo that he could play the flute better than Apollo. Apollo said, well, we'll have a competition, and if you lose, I'm going to skin you alive. He lost, he got skinned alive. So this shows you the ancient contribution. It's still an ancient mentality. I mean, it also is a cruelty there that to us seems horrendous, but I guess in the 16th century, there was a lot of cruelty all around you, so this wasn't too much. In any case, if you could just turn a few more pages, what have we got here? Oh, yeah, I'd like to see his portrait. Keep going till you hit his portrait. There. Okay, so here we can see Vesalius. You can see Vesalius, and you can see him dissecting. There's Andreas Vesalius at 20, I think it's 29 years of age. Who, and you can see how he seems concentrated. I mean, incredible. Okay, so as I say, his life didn't work out too well. Here, no, he's 28. It says down at the bottom. This is the dates on there, 1542, and when he was 29. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a couple more pictures, and then I'll quit. What I would like you to look at is, could you go to page 21? Okay, you'll see 5 skulls here, and these skulls have what we call sutures. Okay, on the skull, you can see the bones are joined. See how the bones are joined of the skull? It's not all one bone, and you can see there are different patterns. This is goes back to the Hippocratic writings, where they actually talk about the different patterns of the sutures of the skull. In fact, it's wrong. They don't fit into the categories that they tell us, which again shows us Vesalius between two worlds, right? He's got the ancient world, and especially there was another anatomist by the name of Michael Servetus, who was also partly a theologian, and probably that's why he got burned at the stake. But probably Vesalius didn't want to take any chances, and by criticizing Galen, who the church sort of supported, it was kind of a tricky business, right? So Vesalius, whenever he hits a hard part, he tries to gloss over it, right? When he makes a difference, when he improves the anatomy of the ancients, he proves it, but he doesn't say it's wrong. So it's kind of an interesting position he's in. So, okay, so that's one. I mean, then I'm going to just show you a couple more things. If you would turn to page, why do you do page 210? And we're going to have here a series of what are called the muscle men. Okay, and the muscle men are anatomical dissections of the human body, of the male. Well, that's one more thing. And human anatomy was thought of as the male human anatomy. Female anatomy was the other one, right? And it shows up in here, but only in its own little section. Okay. Although there are places where Vesalius has both. Okay, so what we have here is the human body as it is, okay, naked. Next, turn the next page, which is going to be, let me just look at the number here. Number 214. 214 is the human body skinned. Okay, so the muscles are now, the skin has been removed, and so you can see there's all the surface muscles. And what we're going to do in the next pictures is just go deeper, deeper, deeper till we're down to the skeleton. So that way you can understand all of these, I mean, how they all relate to one another. Well, obviously I could give a whole lecture on Vesalius. It's not going to happen. I'll just finish then the whole story. Oh, there's one thing you can turn to, 164. It was just the last picture I was going to show you, which shows a human skeleton standing beside a tomb. And on it is written, things of the mind last forever, everything else dies. And that was a very Renaissance idea, right? That the truth will last. But in any case, I'll just finish by saying, obviously, by studying books, you find out about a lot. You find about the finances, you find about the culture in general, you find about the subject in question, you find about people's careers, and you also find out who buys them, and through the ages, what they do with them, how they change them, how they go from culture to culture. And another thing is amazing how international the whole thing is. This book, this Vesalius was from Holland, but he grew up in Belgium, and then he went to Paris, and then he went to Padua. And they got the artist from Calcar, I don't know where he's from, but he's another place. And then they published the book in Basel. And the book then, I mean, this book they knew was going to be a hit, and I think it was. So they just sold it everywhere. I mean, once this book was there, anatomy was never again anything like what it was before, because everybody started so much further ahead. So we can see how books really they come through history. They keep part of the old, but then they always then give the starting point for the new. Great. Okay. Well, enough. Okay. Thank you very much for your patience.
Sure.
Or try.
Thanks, Paul. Does anyone have any questions for Paul? You can put it into the chat, or I can pass them along.
Yeah.
Maybe we can take 5 minutes for questions.
Paul, is that a copy of the sales of the second edition?
This is the second edition of 1555. The first one's 1543.
Here's a question for everybody here, maybe. Does Western offer a course in this area?
The answer is no.
Certainly offers a course in the history of medicine
The history of medicine for sure.
and the history of science.
The history of science.
And books that courses that focus on books.
I teach in book history. Emerson teaches history of science.
Yeah.
Come by and we can do it all.
Oh, here it is.
A question from Vivian McAllister.
Oh, I know Vivian.
Our edition of Vesalius is the last published in his lifetime. Did he make many changes for this edition?
Well, Vivian, thank you for your question. Not that I know of, but I can tell you, Toronto has a copy of the second edition with Vesalius's notes in it, preparing it for the third edition, which was never published. So somebody can do a very nice thesis on this, going through it and find out just how his mind was working and how it was changing.
Then what prompted the second edition, and they just ran out of first edition?
Pardon?
What prompted the second edition? If there wasn't much change from the first edition to the second edition.
Why was there a second edition?
They just ran out of the first.
Of
edition?
course.
Okay, so it's both. Okay.
Oh, and one more thing about this edition. These woodcuts, it was carved on wood, okay? Not the printing, but the pictures. These woodcuts were found in Munich at the beginning of the 20th century. And from those woodcuts, of course, they were warped. And so they had to make negative shapes to fit them, but they reprinted them all and they were destroyed in the Second World War. So that shows you can make it, you can make it a long way, but luck's always in there.
There's a comment. I hope one day Dr. Potter talks to us about Alexandria University and medicine in the old days.
Mhm. Well, I used to do that.
How would the illustrations in the Hippocrates have been printed? Woodcuts as well, just the same?
No, there are none. Oh, that one
No,
on the
the
front
one-
page.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. That one was made by the publisher and he used it in a lot of different books. He used it in Galen, for example. That's the same. That's a woodcut.
Okay.
That's a woodcut. And as far as anatomical illustrations, after Vesalius, quite soon, they went to copper engravings. Already in the 16th century, right? Fallopian, is a fallopian tube? A fallopian in the middle of the century even, right? Has copper engravings. And then Eustachius is a station too. So this is one of these things. It started at the top, right? I mean, these are the most glorious pictures any artist could make on the subject, and they're there in the early book, but then nobody could ever improve it or change. People tried to reprint they did engrave them again, but they were never as good as the first ones. Okay.
Well, can you talk a bit more about the cost of these books? I keep thinking that this has got to be an expensive, costly book.
It is a very costly book. Okay, I can say this first I can tell you about the Hippocrates, okay? Hippocrates over there. Well, Galen, the Aldine one, okay? The Aldine one, there were 5 volumes of Galen, and this is only the Greek, it's not pictures. And it cost, we know, it cost 30 gold ducats, which was a good professor's yearly salary, probably more. So that's with no pictures. Now, Vesalius, I would guess it would cost, a lot of money. I mean, I would, hundreds of thousands if you'd reckon it around.
So how would physicians have access to this? Only through their medical training, the university would have a copy? Or?
Yeah, I think there were, well, if you ask me, where are they today? The most beautiful, perfect copy I ever saw with wide margins, right? This was of Galen's Greek, is the Sorbonne, and it belonged to the Jesuit school. So the church, we have to remember, the church was very learned. The church, a lot of these books were in monasteries. So not our medieval idea of a monastery, but our idea of, as the church, well, think of Galileo and so on. The church was interested in science. So I think they were first the nobility, who probably didn't read them. And then there would be rich doctors. I mean, kings always had to have doctors, right? And kings had to have doctors, and these doctors became rich. And so that with their money then, if you had a Vesalius and you were trying to recruit kings, it would be a great starting point, wouldn't it? I mean, show the king Vesalius and he'd think he could cure you. Think the doctor could cure you.
Kind of a status symbol, or the
exactly,
knowledge already, but having it on your desk.
Oh, I think so. Having it in your library. Right? So I think that's where, I don't know how many, we do know, I don't know though, it's about 1,000 copies for each of those first two editions. So it gives you an idea. So, I mean, if you could sell them for a high price, then that's why there was no holding back with producing them, right? I mean, you got the most famous doctor, you got the famous artist, and you can see the printing's fine and paper's 500 years old. So, good is good. I mean, quality is quality. Quality is quality. Yeah, so I think I didn't talk much about money, but like the little book wouldn't have cost much, right? The little Scribonius and so on. Although that is an original binding, right? So you can see and somebody's dribbled ink on it, it's eaten into it, and so on. Just what you'd expect, right? I mean, it's a book you use. The paper's still okay. People didn't. I mean, it took science to make bad quality.
So what do you tell Paul when, our students look at Vesalius that's been digitized for the National Library of Medicine and they can go on to tablets and see it, and then you see.
Well, it's a different thing, isn't it?
Is it the sense of the size, the paper, the smell,
Sure.
the art?
Well, it's fetishism. Fetishism is in a way, a good thing because it's the real, genuine thing that was there. I mean, this book was it says right in it on the front. It was bound in 1573. Well, it's been somewhere since 1573.
There's a comment here from someone saying, "Thank you, Dr. Potter. I'm just reading about Aldo Menuccio's life."
That's right. All this is very important.
Thanks, everyone on Zoom. I think we're going to call the session closed, at least the Zoom session. Thank you very much for coming. And I've put an email address into the chat if you're interested in contacting us and finding out more about these texts. Thank you very much, Dr. Potter,
Oh, my pleasure.
for speaking this
It's always
afternoon.
good to have you. Good to have you.